again Struck Up. I'm back bringing you another Warhammer Chaosbane, and this is again for Elessa, the Scout, and this is a summoner build which makes it so that we don't do much damage, but all the damage comes from the summons. I've included mostly skills that are for summons together with a couple of extra cooldown skills, so this build really doesn't need energy, but I would suggest different ways to play it later in the video when we're talking about skills and passives and god skills. I'm also suggesting an alternative version to gear it up for counter-attack based damage rather than the flat damage and HP I'm going for right now. Mind you, I only had 2 green armor pieces, a green bow and Ring of Resonance together with a green amulet. So I was missing a lot of stuff, a lot of potential. This is Chaos 7 that you're seeing, and the build can do Chaos 7, a bit of a difficult task to complete, but it's not impossible. Even when I was fighting the boss, I actually got 2 shot because of being reckless and not careful. But then I tried again and I got him without dying. But keep in mind, I've played around with this build, and yeah, I've managed to figure out 2 ways to build it. I just don't have enough blessing materials, but later today, maybe on stream, I can try the counter-attack based setup, but I'm playing with the flat damage and HP based setup. The summons can do up to 20 million sometimes. Since I'm using deadly tips, the more summons we have, the more damage. Alternatively, you can get up to 200% extra damage with Tireless Guardians instead of deadly tips, but the way I play it, I think deadly tips is better. And mind you, the summons don't do that much damage on regular enemies, but since we have Assassination, we do 50% extra damage on enemies with high HP, which I assume would be bosses and maybe some of the elites, but I think it's just the bosses that get melted with Assassination when the summons focus the enemy. So the only problem you might encounter would be that sometimes the summons would not be attacking the same target, and the game currently doesn't have a pet attack button. I think one way to make this game even better would be for the developers to add a button that we can press so that we can tell our pets to attack a certain target. So let's stop talking about this and quickly show you the skills, the god skills, and then the gear I would suggest. The skills that this build uses go like this. Master Archer here, but you can put any one you want as long as it's the basic energy generator. Then spinning blades, you can put anything else. I prefer using skills with cooldown, but an energy wasting skill would be nice. Something like reflex shot if you like it, or brambles can go there as a suggestion, or you can try and get the living roots. Any of those would be fine. Here I use hungry roots, another skill with cooldown, and having those 2 skills with cooldown together with this would help me proc things like the Ring of Resonance, which stuns nearby enemies when we use skills with cooldown. Other things that you can benefit from would be the invasion skills. Something like Duelist Chain Reaction would allow you to get more crit hit damage, but currently this build does not get bonuses from the crit hit damage because the summons cannot crit and they're the main source of damage. So something like this might help you move around, or maybe something like this, but I would strongly suggest just maybe going for some potion like the damage potion. So ignore the other stuff. In the meantime, here Defiler's Reckoning Mustard, we need that. Then we need Wild Incarnation Mustard. And what I've decided to go for is Seeds of Blood Superior together with Hallowed Spirit Superior, and I think those should be kept in that way. Then another thing that adds up to extra damage on bosses would be Assassination Mustard. It fits so well into the setup. You're not gonna do a lot of damage when it comes to regular enemies, but when it comes to bosses, your summons would be dealing 50% increased damage. You as well. Then Follow Tracks Mustard can be downgraded, and Tactical Retreat is the basic one. If you want, you can upgrade it, but what you would get from the upgrade is just some extra poison trail, so nothing too fancy. And if you downgrade this, you get energy regen, but you lose 5%. So if you downgrade this, you can get some more points to maybe put something else instead of Master Blacksmiths. Master Blacksmiths is where you can ideally customize this to your preference. I would ideally put Elixir of Power and downgrade this skill. This is what I would suggest as the ideal setup, but you can go and get some extra HP if you want it, or maybe you can try and get this one, energy gain and healing, because the summons do heal thanks to how Spirit Superior. So just pick whatever you prefer. I think Master Blacksmith is nice because you can see the damage here, 274, without it 249, so it definitely improves the damage of our summons. So another setup I would give you is an alternative setup where instead of using things like Assassination, we might end up using things like Ambush Mastered, and then we would change our gear to counterattack based gear, and the one thing we would lose is Wild Incarnation. So I'm gonna show you later a second setup of the god skills and the skills you can use, so hopefully you enjoyed that one as well. I've not tried the counterattack one because I didn't have the required blessings to test it, but I will try it soon. Legendary ranks that I like to use would be Legendary Punishment with let's say something like 15 or 20% chance to get that extra damage. Since your summons are constantly hitting, even 15% is not bad. If you want damage reduction, of course, get this one, but if you want damage reduction and damage, you have those three skills with cooldown, so this also works. Legendary Reinforcement. It's gonna give you less damage and less damage reduction, but it gives you both. So decide what you want. You might even go and make, when you have higher legendary ranks, you can try and mix two things with damage reduction or two things with damage, up to you. But this is how I prefer to play it, with Legendary Punishment. Now on to the god skills. The god skills I use are kind of mixture between the old and the new god skill tree. From the old god skill tree I decided to get Defiler's Reckoning Mastered. And if you spend a few less points, 1, 2, 3, 4 less points, you can go ahead and use the basic Defiler's Reckoning, but I think each enemy killed by a Dryad grants a chance for a new one to appear. Is amazing if you're not using Tireless Guardian, but rather like me using Deadly Tips in the dagger socket, so we want more summons. This one is superior, higher chance to make a small Dryad appear, better than the basic one, and I don't think it's worth it investing into the Mastered. So we stop here, and here we get Assassination, and then we get another 100 and actually 84% crit damage. We don't really need that crit damage, so maybe we can just remove this. Maybe that could be removed, and then those points could be spent. 1, 2, 4, 5, 6 points. You can spend them elsewhere. As I said, I will be experimenting with a setup that uses Ambush Mastered, so that's something I'm gonna look into. That would mean I'm probably gonna have to sacrifice Wild Incarnation and Assassination. So let's see, what can we remove here? This one, extra cooldown reduction, is nice, but if you feel like you don't need it, don't take it. But since we don't need crit damage, it really seems to be fine. For the counterattack setup, what I would suggest is resetting this and then going all the way here maybe. Then probably trying to get Assassination would be a bit of a overstretch, so maybe we can get the basic Assassination. I do like this Defiler's Reckoning though, so we have 9 points from this, and with those 9 points we can get the basic Wild Incarnation and maybe go and get the basic Assassination, so 1 point was not enough. Alternatively, we can get the superior Ambush instead of the Mastered, and that would save us 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 points. or you can just get this cooldown reduction and just save 5 points and get this one. So that's one version of doing it. The other version would be going like this, then again getting Assassination mastered, I mean no, not mastered but superior, so like this, then getting this, and here since you have 2 points and we don't need crit damage, my suggestion would be maybe get that cooldown reduction. You could get some extra armor piercing here for 2%, but I think the cooldown reduction would be fine. So this is my suggestion if you try and put a lot of counter-attack damage in your gear, which in turn would give you physical damage, which would boost the summons. And what you would be doing on this side if you go for that setup would be something like this. First off, equip the active skills, make sure you've got them both. Where were those skills? So we don't need Winds of Wishes, so we need those two, but like this. And that gives you a lot of points to spare. It gives you a lot of points to spare, which is 18 points, which means you can upgrade some things, you can play around with other stuff here. You can probably even get that extra 15% damage and still have some points. But the God skill setup I showed you is a fun setup for when you want to be using the extra counter-attack damage based physical damage. Mind you, at the moment you're seeing here only 9.1%, but 9.1% is with barely investing into counter-attack damage, with 1.8 thousand counter-attack damage. Get that to a decent amount and you would be seeing some very good results. Test it, see for yourself how it would be, and let me know if you think that works well. If you want counter-attack on the gear, I'm gonna show you the combo. Blessings wise, for flat damage, for what I've got right now, flat damage and HP, we're using this with full links. For counter attack damage this changes. So this is damage HP, and you can even use green, green, red on one side or on both sides. Of course this had to be a link here, but yeah, this is it. So you can do green, green, red in the middle in one side or maybe in both sides. But when it comes to counter attack damage, you have option to go for more HP or for more armor. More green means more HP, more yellow, more blue means more armor. This is what you want for counter attack damage if you want to try the counter attack damage based physical damage increase, which would give you a lot of damage to the summons. So keep that in mind. It is not a bad setup, and we're only sacrificing 10% extra damage to bosses, but we're getting a lot of damage to regular enemies, so keep that in mind. I think it might be the better setup, and I will be testing it on my stream maybe tonight. I'm gonna just have to farm some fragments and test it. So on to the gear setup. Even though I already gave you some intro about the blessings, I will mention in detail about the gear. The gear I've selected for this build is the Deadly Glow set, also known as the Starlight set. I would first of all tell you the stats that you want to be looking out for in all pieces, which is HP, and then you want, if you're going for counter-attack damage build, go for the counter-attack damage. If you're not going for a counter-attack damage based physical damage, then avoid it. Avoid health regeneration unless you really want to be doing things like invasions and when you're fighting enemies that give you damage over time debuffs, like the cinch enemies or other ones. So on the helmet you want cooldown reduction, it's the only armor piece that can give you cooldown reduction, and avoid cost reduction and energy on all pieces unless you're using an energy using skill, which in my setup I don't, but the one I would suggest trying out would be barbed brambles, because it really does a lot of damage, and going for a physical version rather than the other one. So moving on to the selection, as I said, armor HP is a must-have. Cooldown on the helmet, and then other things like resistance to damage over time, they are not necessary, but it helps in invasions and against enemies that deal damage over time, such as Act 4 enemies. So nothing special to tell about the tassets and tunic, but the boots can give you movement speed, so you might want to get that. And for the gauntlets you might want to get flat damage, but avoid damage over time. This build does not benefit much from damage over time, if at all, so avoid damage over time. It will only help if you're using a bramble setup, so avoid energy, avoid cost reduction, avoid wood quality, avoid health regeneration unless you really need it, and resist to damage over time unless you really need it. So here you would want armor, HP, flat damage as the priority stats, and then if you're lucky you can get critical damage. So for the amulet, there are two amulets I would suggest. For more damage you really want Wild Hunt Talisman, because this would boost the damage of Defiler's Reckoning and of Wild Incarnation. If I were to equip it right now it won't change the damage in the tooltip, but it would be better overall. Another one, if you need cooldown reduction to be able to spam this more and to be able to summon your minions more often, would be the Ember Talisman. So those are the two bases I would suggest. Alternative option would be something like a Cleansing Talisman to heal when you use a God skill. Quite often you would find yourself having the Defiler's Reckoning up and it being ready for recast, so you can recast it to heal yourself. The same goes for Wild Incarnation. You can recast it to heal yourself. Mind you, since I showed you two setups, one of them being with Assassination, the other one with the counterattack based damage. Currently my skills at the bottom are set for the counterattack based damage, so this is the basic one, it's not the one from here, which normally I would use. So if you're wondering why suddenly this changed, at the bottom you're now not seeing exactly the things that were used for the gameplay recording. But in the previous section I showed you why and what I changed, just to give you some alternatives. So here you can get movement speed, as I said, and here the damage based stuff. Here Amber Talisman or Wild Hunt with optionally Cleansing Talisman for healing. Now ring wise, I'm using Ring of Resonance, which you do get from the invasions. Ring of Resonance you can get from here, and other rings which I don't suggest getting are Shadows and Dexterity from there. So duty chain reaction, not the best for this build, but if you're wondering where to get those chain reaction, that's from where. And if you want to get potion of resistance, swiftness, or this one which is very good, Elixir of Power, I suggest trying using this one. Then that's from where you unlock them. You want to get this and this note, then move on and try and get this and this note, and then go down. Of course optionally you can get notes like those here to give you some extra debuffs to the enemies to make things easier. So some of those notes I've personally skipped, but if you feel like the enemies are a bit too difficult, get those. Back to the gear. Rings, as I said, Ring of Resonance. If you can get Ring of Resonance, good choices would be, you see I'm using Ring of Guardian in one slot, and I do suggest having that to get that cooldown reduction. That's why I suggest getting crit chance anywhere you can. So here you can get crit chance and cooldown reduction, very important. Crit chance, cooldown reduction, preferably flat damage and HP. Those four stats are amazing. Avoid wood quality, health regeneration, resistance to damage over time, energy, cost reduction. Maybe armor piercing if you can get it is good, or armor, but I don't think it can drop on this slot. So other rings worth mentioning, for damage reduction this is not bad, but I'd suggest Ring of the Spirits to keep healing yourself. This is great, and with enough crit chance you would end up critting yourself a lot. Mind you, the way I play it, I don't shoot myself a lot. I try to make the enemies getting hit by the summons, which means no crits. So you still want to do some shooting every now and then to get this. Another thing would be Untamed Ring. Performing a critical hit has a chance to grant a damage bonus, and this damage bonus would apply to you and to the summons. So Untamed Ring is another good choice. This allows us to summon to make an explosion that stuns the enemies within a certain radius. So I really find it helpful when playing a summoner build, when I cast 1, 2, 3 skills with cooldowns to be able to summon the nearby enemies. This is also not bad. Maximum health and healing is increased for all players, and this healing also applies to the summons that get healed from Hallowed Spirit Superior. You also get healed from that, so it's amazing. So that's it for the rings. Avoid this one, you definitely don't want this one. And yeah, I said about the amulets. Now weapons. One option is Deadly Tips, 30% increased damage for each creature summoned, and you can summon up to 10 creatures by just the default options, which is 4 from here, 3 from here, and 1 from here. So actually it's 8, but thinking about the Pact Bow makes it up to 10, because the Pact Bow gives us a Dryad for each time you go through the familiar. Like now I've moved 2 times, so I should now have increased damage by a lot. Like that's like 300% increased damage, just what I did. So this is a good choice. Deadly Tips. Here you want either Deadly Tips or Tireless Guardians, which would give you 200% damage for 8 seconds when you regenerate energy through the familiar, which means you would want to go through one familiar and make sure that the familiar doesn't, the second one doesn't go through you until it's time, until those 8 seconds have passed. That means if you time it well, that 16 seconds of uptime, probably those 16 seconds would be enough for the first familiar to have regenerated, so you can constantly keep those 200% up. I'm not sure whether this stacks to 400 if you go through the familiar at the same time through both of them, but if it does, then that's up to 400%. You can still get with Deadly Tips more summons, because with Deadly Tips this can give you more than the 10 summons, and this can give you more than the 10 summons for 300, so you might end up getting 400 and more % damage if this and this keeps proccing to summon new Dryads. So the 2 daggers, for them the draws you want are Armor Piercing, Crit Chance, Flat Damage, HP, Cooldown Reduction. Counterattack damage only if you're going for the counterattack damage based passive, which you might want to experiment with that, depending what gear you've got. You cannot get crit damage here. You can get crit damage here, but you cannot get crit chance on the bow, which brings us to the bows. Pact Bow is the one you want. Any other bow will not be as good of a choice. If you don't have a good Pact Bow, Master Archer is not bad. If you have an amazing Master Archer, use it. I would avoid using Growth Fangs and Symbiosis, but I guess you might want to experiment with some weird builds if you have a Godly Road one of those. But the Pact Bow is the one I suggest, and you want cooldown reduction, flat damage, HP, and preferably some crit damage. Damage over time and cost reduction are not so good, but armor piercing would be better. So if instead of cost reduction here and damage over time I had some armor piercing and maybe some other good bonus, it would have been nice. It would have definitely been nice. I think this kind of sums up the gear setup. So now it's time to show you the rest of the recording of the gameplay footage. Gameplay wise, how you play the build is you wanna be away from danger. You wanna make sure you spam your summons and then stay back, spray maybe with Master Archer because it's piercing and it hits a lot of enemies very quick. It can proc a lot of stuff, and let the summons do the work for you. Using choke points like this, you see I blocked the exit and there's just one enemy that tried to flank me, but some of my summons stopped him, so I let the summons block the enemies and then stack up together. The thing is, this build does not do much damage to normal enemies, it does more damage to bosses and things with high health. So what you would want is to try and kill the least amount of possible enemies to unlock the boss and just reach the boss as quickly as possible, and then just keep dodging, keep avoiding danger, maybe using, if you have Ring of Resonance, using those stun explosions or stun reactions would be nice. And yeah, choke points again, look at that, this is another choke point that can be used. Try to get a good look at your surroundings and use them to your advantage to funnel the enemies and kill them bit by bit, so you can make sure that all your summons are attacking, if not the same target, at least the same few targets that are next to each other. Here is how I end up kind of one-two shot it by not being careful and not paying attention what the boss is doing. Sad dead times, and now I'm gonna show you a proper kill without dying on the next try. So yeah, if the summons focus the boss, you would notice at times when the summons would focus the boss and attack him at the same time, it would be good damage, but otherwise they're just spread out, and we really need a force attack button that lets us target an enemy and all the summons immediately switch the target to that enemy. This would be just a great quality of life for this game. Once there aren't any enemies around the boss, my summons focus him and you can see big chunks of HP getting dropped. Millions of damage on it under a few seconds. So if you enjoyed this video and want to be notified for when I upload more Wooter content like Chaosbane, Torchlight Frontiers, Borderlands, Wilson, etc., you can subscribe to my channel, and you can also hit the like or dislike button to let me know whether you liked or disliked the video, and also let me know in the comment section if you want to tell me that something was bad or good or whatever. So thank you again for watching the video struck up, keep it cool, and until next time.